Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. Today, we've got something fresh to talk about because the developers behind Arma Reforger just pushed out another official update. This one dated September 4th, 2025, and I want to break it all down with you in a way that really feels like we're just hanging out and chatting about what's new. Now, this particular update isn't the kind of massive patch that completely reshapes how you play the game, but it is part of the ongoing rhythm of improvements that keep the community engaged, and it's worth talking about because it shows where Bohemia's priorities are at right now. So, first off, what exactly happened? The update rolled out under version number 1.4.55, and it landed simultaneously on Steam, Xbox Box, and PlayStation, meaning this isn't just some experimental branch situation. This is a stable branch release for everyone. That right there is already a sign of how the studio is pacing things. The experimental updates, those have been the heavier hitters with changes to gameplay systems, helicopters, physical interactions, and even some workbench stuff. But when it comes to stable releases like this one, we're usually looking at things that either polish the user experience, fix critical issues, or introduce quality of life adjustments. And this September 4th update fits neatly into that pattern. The headline here is Workshop Improvements, specifically support for ManW finalists and winners, filters, and banners. For those of you who might not be following every little piece of Arma community news, ManW stands for Make Arma Not War, and it's a long-running community content competition that Bohemia has been reviving and pushing in Reforger. It's essentially a way to spotlight the best of what creators are making, whether that's scenarios, mods, add-ons, or entirely custom gameplay experiences. If you've spent any time in the Arma community, you already know that mods are basically the lifeblood of this franchise. They're what takes a base game and turns it into something way bigger, whether we're talking about ultra-realistic military scenarios, wild, alternate histories, or just fun little tweaks that change how the game feels. So what this update is doing is putting a spotlight on those community efforts in a very official way. With the new workshop filters and banners, you'll now be able to see which content has been flagged as a finalist or even a winner in the ManU competition. And while that might sound small, it's actually a really smart move because it gives people direction when they're browsing. Think about how many mods you scroll through in a workshop, right? There's always tons of stuff, and sometimes it's overwhelming to figure out what's worth your time and what's maybe more of an experiment. Now, if you're new to the game or you don't follow every Discord or Reddit thread, you can just fire up the workshop and immediately see a banner telling you, hey, this project has been recognized officially, it's one of the finalists, or it actually won. That kind of recognition is huge, both for creators who put in the hours to make something polished and for players who just want the best content without doing a ton of research. I think this also says a lot about Bohemia's relationship with the community. Arma has always been unique compared to a lot of military shooters because it's never just about what the studio puts out. It's always been about that collaboration between devs and players. You look at Arma 3, so much of its legacy is wrapped up in what the modding scene produced over the years. So by making these workshop improvements part of an official patch, it's almost like the developers are saying, hey, we're going to meet you halfway. We'll build the infrastructure to make sure the stuff you're making gets the spotlight it deserves. That's an investment in the future of the game, because if creators feel supported, they're more likely to stick around, keep the work, keep building, and keep the ecosystem thriving. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, but is this all they did? And yeah, on paper, this update is extremely light compared to some of the stuff we've seen in the experimental branch lately. If you remember the August 26th experimental build, that was version 1.5.0.32, and it brought in new gameplay elements like manual helicopter collective control, changes to AP mine behavior, a bunch of fixes to UI quirks, and even some workbench stability improvements. Then just a week before that, the August 19th experimental build was tackling physical interactions, adjustments to supply mechanics, tweaks to control points on Arland, and plenty of bug fixes. So those experimental builds are where the heavy lifting is happening. The stable updates are like maintenance mode, making sure everyone has access to smoother tools and presentation features. What's interesting about that is it gives us a little window into how Bohemia is managing development right now. They're clearly treating the stable branch as a safe space, a place where they're not going to overwhelm players with big changes that might break things, but instead they add small, polished touches that just make the day-to-day experience better. And at the same time, if you test and see where the future of Reforger is heading, you can hop over to the experimental builds and get your hands on those early features. It's a two-track system, and honestly, it works pretty well for this kind of game. Let's circle back to ManW for a second, because I think the real story of this update isn't just the banners and filters, it's what it represents. If you've been around long enough to remember the original Make Arma Not War contest back in the Arma 3 days, you'll know that it was a huge deal. It created a ton of visibility for mods that might otherwise have stayed niche. Some of those projects even became household names in the Arma community. By reviving that contest in Reforger and now integrating its results into the workshop itself, the developers are kind of formalizing this pipeline of creativity. You make something great, it gets noticed in ManView, and now, thanks to this patch, anyone browsing can instantly see that recognition. That's how you build prestige into a community-driven system. Another layer here is accessibility. A lot of newer players come into Arma Reforger, maybe because they saw it on console for the first time, or they wanted a taste of what's eventually coming in Arma 4, and they get overwhelmed. They see this workshop full of mods and have no idea what's good. They don't necessarily have the context to understand why one add-on is more significant than another. With these ManView banners, the guesswork gets cut down. It's almost like a curated shelf in a library. Instead of walking into a massive room full of books and not knowing where to start, you now have a shelf that says, hey, these are award winners, check them out first. And once you do, you'll probably feel more comfortable exploring deeper. Now, in terms of what this means for the future, I think this update, as small as it is, fits into a larger pattern. The developers are slowly but steadily building up the ecosystem. First, they focused on performance and basic systems. Then they opened the door for deeper experimental gameplay features, and now they're polishing the workshop, which is the bridge between the developers and the community. If you look at this in the long run, it feels like groundwork for when Arma 4 eventually arrives. By then, they'll already have a system in place that supports contests, recognition, and accessibility for mods. Reforger is basically a testing ground, not just for gameplay mechanics, but also for infrastructure like this. It also makes me think about how recognition is the health of a community. When creators feel like their work is being seen, that's motivating. And when players have easy access to that work, the overall quality of their experience goes up. That's a win-win. But what's fascinating is how subtle this patch is in achieving that. On paper, it's just banners and filters, right? But in practice, it's potentially a huge driver for engagement. And let's not forget the timing. It's early September. The ManW competition is in full swing. And by pushing out this update now, Bohemia is aligning the tools with the community's excitement. People are already talking about finalists and winners, so giving them visibility in the workshop while that buzz is fresh just makes sense. It's a reminder that sometimes good game development isn't just about fixing bugs or dropping new content. It's about syncing up with your community's energy and providing tools that enhance that moment. Of course, if you're someone who is hoping for big gameplay changes in this update, you might feel a little underwhelmed. But I'd argue that's not the role of a stable branch patch right now. The developers have made it pretty clear through their pattern of updates that if you want those meaty changes, the experimental branch is where you should look. Stable patches like this one are about refinement and support. And honestly, that's fine. It keeps the stable version reliable for casual players or console users who might not want to test out half-finished systems while still keeping the development train moving forward. So here's the big picture. September 4th's 1.4.55 update may look tiny, but it's a strategic move. It's reinforcing the workshop as a hub of community activity, it's boosting the visibility of the Make Arma Not War competition, and it's showing us how Bohemia balances stable versus experimental development. If you're a creator, this is validation. If you're a player, this is a shortcut to quality content. And if you're someone watching the future of Arma unfold, this is another small piece of the puzzle that shows how they're shaping Reforger into a foundation for what's coming next.